Angel Island in San Francisco Bay is well known for processing 500,000 immigrants from 80 countries between 1910 and 1940. Many of them were from Japan, including thousands of picture brides. About 85,000 Japanese arrived in the port of San Francisco between 1910 and 1940, and many passed through the island. Less well known, however, is the island's use as a U.S. Army temporary detention center to house Japanese immigrants during World War II, like Tuna Canyon, San Pedro, and Sharp Park in California, Ellis Island, and sites in Boston, Cincinnati, and Seattle. Those rounded up were classified as enemy aliens, but they could not have become U.S. citizens even if they had wanted to, because of the Naturalization Act of 1790, which said only free white persons could become naturalized. African Americans were added after the Civil War, but Japanese could not naturalize until 1952. Many locations in Hawaii were also used to incarcerate residents of the islands, including Honouliuli, now a national monument, and the Kilauea military camp in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Some were sent to the U.S. continent, where many passed through Angel Island. Because they had been surveyed for months and even years, many were arrested on Pearl Harbor Day and in the months that followed, even before Executive Order 9066 was signed. Professor Tetsuden Kashima estimates that 17,000 Japanese immigrants were classified as enemy aliens and held for all or part of the war. Some were later allowed to reunite with their families at War Relocation Authority camps. Of these, 700 enemy aliens from Japan were held at Angel Island, of whom about 600 were from Hawaii and about 100 from the West Coast. These Japanese immigrants generally stayed about a week on Angel Island before being sent off to other camps in the mainland, such as Missoula, Montana, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. These men were often Buddhist or Shinto ministers, journalists, community leaders, or had some ties to Japan, often through martial arts. Marissa Shoji interviewed Joyce Kuwata and Jason Seki, the grandchildren of Wakijiro Yuki, who was arrested in the San Jose area on the grounds of his affiliation with Kendo in 1942.
This is the actual form that the FBI filled out, and it tells you right here about what happened when they came to the door.
Bachan told the kids to leave the house, and then she was told by the FBI to pack a bag with clothing and personal items.
For Jijo.
Yeah, and then she was putting the razor in the bag, and they snatched it away from her. And then they were handcuffed. He was handcuffed and taken away. And she remembers seeing Bachan throwing a coat over his hands because she didn't want the kids to see him in handcuffs.
Journalist Yasuhiro Soga wrote about what he saw. Living quarters for all 49 of us from Hawaii were 2 rooms measuring about 36 by 70 feet on the second floor of an old building that had once been the Immigration Bureau office. Because there were about 90 internees from California already housed there, space was very tight. The beds were tri-level bunks with barely enough walking space in the aisles. There were about 10 windows and 1 ventilator, but with 140 occupants, air circulation was poor. That night I had difficulty breathing and had a headache. Soga also noticed extensive writings by Chinese immigrants and said he left his own writing on the walls. This letter from Angel Island by Taiichiro Hanzawa from Maui was found on eBay and describes the conditions on the island and concern for his family left behind. Yoshio George Hoshida worked for Hilo Electric, but was arrested because of his involvement promoting judo and worked with a Buddhist temple. His wife Tamae later brought 3 of their daughters to meet him in Jerome, Arkansas to join him and pass through Angel Island, but he was not released from Santa Fe for nearly a year. George Hishida was a Fresno photographer who was fingered by an anonymous informant who noted his photos of the Bay Bridge and a dam near Fresno. His daughter Grace wrote to the authorities successfully pleading for the family not to be deported to Japan after the war. Recently, NPR station KQED ran a podcast and story on the air about the Japanese on Angel Island during World War II. Reporter Cecilia Lay interviewed Mark Shiginaga, grandson of Kakuro Shiginaga, who was arrested in Hawaii and sent to Angel Island.
For Mark Shiginaga, learning that the Bay Area held a small piece of his grandfather's internment history was eye-opening.
One of the things I thought immediately was, oh, I thought I was the first person of my family in the Bay Area, but that's not true. My grandfather was here, just like 5 miles from where I live.
Kakuro Shiganaga spent 9 days total on Angel Island before moving to 6 different camps across the country, including in New Mexico, Louisiana, Wisconsin, and Tennessee. He was freed over 3 years later, a couple months after World War II ended.
His personality was different. After the war, he was not severe at all, and his attitude sort of melted away and became much softer. He noticed the inequities and the really torrid conditions in which the blacks lived in the South. And he saw similar types of inequities with the Native Americans when he was in Santa Fe. He observed firsthand what these other types of minorities, communities were experiencing, and he thought he was in a better position.
Mark says the internment experience forever changed his grandfather and his perspective of America.
I think about how the war experience shaped the way we were brought up. Basically to be as American as possible, as American and apple pie as possible. I think it was just a protective mechanism by the parents in trying to raise their kids so that they would be accepted.
The Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation is currently working with Angel Island State Park on a permanent exhibit about World War II detention on the island. These books all tell stories of former Angel Island detainees and are available from the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii. To stay updated about this project, sign up at aiisf.org and visit the history section of our website.